Volvo has long been shorthand for longevity. The brand's reputation is built on cars that refuse to quit, vehicles that seem immune to age in a way few manufacturers have ever matched. Yet buried inside that reputation is a strange omission. One particular engine quietly delivered million-mile durability in the real world, not once, not as a stunt, but repeatedly, and still never became legendary. There are engines that dominate conversation because they were fast, others because they powered race cars, won championships, or changed performance benchmarks. Some are remembered because they failed spectacularly, but this engine did none of that. It didn't chase headlines, it didn't redefine horsepower, it didn't even try to impress. And that may be exactly why it disappeared from memory. Automotive mythology isn't built on endurance alone. It's built on storytelling. Engines become icons when someone is there to name them, market them, argue about them, and turn their existence into a narrative. This engine had no such advocates. It lived in ordinary Volvos, driven by ordinary people, used as transportation rather than as identity. While other power plants became symbols, this one became infrastructure. It survived harsh climates, long commutes, taxi duty, and decades of neglect, not because it was revered, but because it was expected to work. Owners didn't boast about it, they relied on it. The engine became invisible precisely because it never demanded attention. That creates the contradiction at the heart of this story. How does something so durable escape recognition? How does an engine capable of outliving the car around it fail to earn a place in the pantheon of greats? The answer isn't found in a spec sheet or a performance figure. It's found in what we choose to celebrate and what we quietly use until it's gone. This is the story of an engine that didn't become a legend, not because it fell short, but because it lasted too long to be noticed. Volvo's engineering culture was never designed to create icons. It was designed to create outcomes. During the period when this engine was developed, the company operated with a philosophy that treated durability not as a feature, but as a responsibility. Cars were expected to function predictably, repeatedly, and for longer than most owners ever planned to keep them. This mindset shaped every major decision. Power outputs were intentionally modest, keeping internal stress low and thermal loads manageable. Tolerances were conservative, favoring consistency over maximum efficiency. Components were designed with margins that assumed misuse, irregular maintenance, and long service intervals. Nothing was pushed to its theoretical limit because limits were viewed as liabilities. Where other manufacturers chased innovation cycles, Volvo resisted unnecessary change. New technology was adopted slowly, only after it proved stable. Complexity was treated with suspicion, not excitement. The goal was not to lead trends, but to avoid mistakes that could compromise long-term reliability. This placed Volvo in direct contrast with competitors who optimized engines for performance figures, fuel economy targets, or regulatory benchmarks. Those goals rewarded short-term gains and visible progress. Volvo's approach rewarded patience. As a result, engines like this one weren't engineered to be talked about. They were engineered to disappear into daily life. Their success was measured in uneventful years, not accolades. Seen through that lens, this engine was not an accident or an overachievement. It was the logical outcome of a philosophy that valued longevity as an ethical choice, not a marketing advantage. That worldview quietly shaped millions of miles without ever demanding recognition. Nothing about this engine was designed to impress. That was not an oversight, it was the point. From the beginning, the engine was engineered for survival, not admiration. Power levels were kept deliberately low relative to displacement, ensuring internal components were never pushed near their limits. Compression ratios stayed conservative, reducing thermal stress and minimizing the long-term fatigue that quietly destroys more ambitious designs. The engine was never asked to be exceptional, it was asked to be consistent. Its layout reflected the same thinking. The architecture favored simplicity over cleverness, with systems arranged for durability and serviceability rather than packaging efficiency or visual appeal. Materials were selected for resilience, not weight savings. Extra mass was tolerated if it meant stability. Redundancy was accepted if it meant fewer catastrophic failures. Every choice reduced the number of ways the engine could fail. There were no cutting-edge features to advertise, no technology that required explanation, no performance figures that demanded attention. Even when newer engines appeared with better efficiency or higher output, this one continued unchanged, doing the same job the same way year after year. That design restraint came with a consequence: invisibility. Enthusiasts tend to celebrate engines that promise something: speed, innovation, transformation. This engine promised nothing beyond reliability. It offered no drama, no personality, no moment where it demanded to be remembered. Media ignored it because there was nothing new to report. Owners ignored it because there was nothing wrong. Yet that absence of excitement became its defining strength. By avoiding extremes, the engine tolerated neglect, irregular maintenance, and unglamorous use without protest. It aged slowly, predictably, almost anonymously, which raises the question that lingers beneath its success. If this approach worked so well, if it produced engines that quietly crossed 1 million miles, why did the industry move away from it? The answer lies not in engineering limits, but in what the modern car world chose to value instead. The 1 million miles didn't come from careful ownership or mechanical obsession. They came from repetition. This engine earned its reputation not in controlled conditions, but in daily use. It powered taxis that rarely cooled down, commuters who followed the same routes for decades, fleet vehicles that prioritized uptime over sympathy, and long-distance drivers who treated the car as a tool rather than a possession. These were not enthusiasts chasing longevity. They were people who needed the car to start tomorrow. That distinction matters. Engines that become famous often rely on exceptional examples. One well-maintained survivor, one owner who did everything right. This engine didn't depend on that. Its durability emerged statistically. Thousands of engines accumulated hundreds of thousands of miles each, year after year, until extreme mileage stopped being remarkable and started being normal. Maintenance was rarely meticulous. Oil changes were done late, sometimes inconsistently. Repairs were reactive rather than preventative. The cars were driven in cold starts, short trips, highway slogs, and everything in between. The engine endured because it was built to tolerate reality, not ideal conditions. Over time, patterns emerged. Mileage climbed without drama. Failures were gradual rather than catastrophic. When problems appeared, they were predictable and manageable, not terminal. The engine aged the way industrial equipment does, slowly, visibly, and without surprise. What's striking is how little attention this attracted. There were no headlines when a taxi crossed 500,000 miles. No forum threads celebrating durability milestones. Owners didn't document the journey because nothing unusual seemed to be happening. The engine simply kept going. That's where its credibility was forged, not through isolated success stories, but through volume. Through decades of ordinary use, quietly confirming the same outcome. By this point, the claim no longer feels theoretical. The evidence isn't one engine that survived, it's an entire population that refused to fail. And that reality forces a harder question. If durability like this was possible, why did it become so rare? The industry did not abandon this engine because it failed. It moved on because the rules changed. As emissions targets tightened and efficiency metrics became central, engineering priorities shifted. Engines were asked to deliver more power from less displacement, better fuel economy on paper, and lower production costs at scale. Durability became secondary, assumed rather than engineered. Product cycles shortened, and long-term survivability stopped being a competitive advantage. Against that backdrop, this engine no longer made sense. It was heavy where others were light, conservative where others were optimized, expensive to overbuild in an era that rewarded minimal margins. On balance sheets and regulatory charts, it looked inefficient, even outdated. Yet on the road, it never left. While newer replacements cycled through revisions, recalls, and redesigns, These engines continued accumulating mileage in silence. Cars around them rusted, interiors wore out, electronics failed, and still the engine remained operational. It outlived platforms, ownership cycles, and sometimes the manufacturer's own expectations. This contrast reveals the real turning point. Progress did not make engines like this obsolete, it made them incompatible. Modern systems value measurable gains within short horizons. Longevity only matters if it can be monetized or advertised. This engine offered neither. Its success unfolded too slowly to matter in quarterly reports, and too quietly to influence marketing narratives. So it was replaced, not because it was inadequate, but because it belonged to a philosophy that no longer fit the future the industry chose to build. And choice reshaped everything that followed. This engine was never forgotten because it lacked merit. It was forgotten because it never created noise. Automotive legends are born from spectacle. Racing success, dramatic failures, controversial designs, or radical performance gains give people something to argue about. This engine offered none of that. It did not dominate tracks, redefine segments, or explode in memorable ways. It simply worked, day after day, without demanding attention. Reliability is a quiet achievement. Engines that don't break don't generate stories. There are no crisis moments, no heroic rebuilds, no forums filled with post-mortems. When something functions as expected for decades, it fades into the background of daily life. Silence becomes the byproduct of success. Automotive media and enthusiast culture amplify this effect. Coverage favors novelty, extremes, and conflict. Marketing departments celebrate innovation cycles, not long-term survival. An engine that changes little and fails rarely offers nothing new to sell, review, or debate. Over time, it slips out of conversation, even as it continues to perform. That absence can feel puzzling in hindsight. How could something so durable leave so little cultural trace? But anonymity was always the natural outcome. This engine lived in ordinary cars, owned by people who valued dependability over identity. It was transportation, not a statement. In the end, its silence wasn't an injustice. It was the price of doing what it was designed to do, without interruption, quietly. This engine's legacy isn't defined by innovation, performance, or recognition. It's defined by trust. It represents an era when engineering prioritized endurance over optimization, tolerance over efficiency curves, and long-term outcomes over short-term gains. The goal wasn't to extract every possible advantage from a design, but to ensure it would survive conditions no engineer could fully predict. That mindset treated reliability as a moral obligation rather than a competitive feature. Nothing about that approach scales easily in the modern industry. Today's systems reward speed of development, measurable improvements, and frequent replacement cycles. Progress is quantified, compared, and marketed. Longevity, when it appears, is often incidental. What was gained is undeniable. Cars are cleaner, faster, safer, and more efficient than ever before. But something quieter was left behind. The patience to accept over-engineering. The willingness to build margins that would never appear on a brochure. The confidence to let success unfold slowly, without attention. This engine continues running not as a protest against modern cars, but as evidence of a different set of values. It survives because it was never asked to do more than it safely could. That brings the story full circle. The engine wasn't forgotten because it failed to matter. It was forgotten because it mattered in a way that didn't demand recognition. It did exactly what it was designed to do, and then kept going.